Let's come back to our game board. Last time we were talking about setting up this style of game board using a metaphor of the game of Go. Areas on the game board as your civilization collects territory. That territory has value. And to extract the value of that area, we can capitalize assets on that area to extract the resources of that area to build up technology, to build up the quality of life so we can remove privation. There's a burgeoning middle class and upper classes that have money to spend and overall invest back into the system to make the system better, to increase technology faster. We have administrative centers that are in play, and we're under the assumption that the administrative centers are playing properly and they're helping to build just and equal laws so that the overall system can keep expanding at a particular pace. And we're not looking at too much global conflict yet in our setup, but it's coming in. We have to start kind of layering nuance on, and that's through my journey of investigating geopolitics, and I'm no means an expert. There's a lot of other people you can check out their videos that are really good at this. But what I'm trying to provide here is a different metaphor and lens to look at this. So I'll play with this idea of this game board that's created, that's in play. And I want to talk about hydraulic despotism. So the ability that I have something that is very much needed by my group, I'm calling my civilization. Water is a big one, food is another one. And with hydraulic despotism, since the word hydro and water is, if you think back to the Roman times where I have aqueducts, if I'm able to turn off the aqueduct, I can create a big problem for the cities that are served by the aqueduct. And if I'm that kind of ruler, and I don't like what you're doing, I can go turn off those systems and wait until the people capitulate. And hopefully, I've taken away their weapons and other means of getting back at me so I can do shenanigans like this so that they can acquiesce to the things that I need them to do. And I think there's an example, North Korea. Like, if you want pure equity, then I think the story goes, and I'm just kind of quoting from memory. I might not have this entirely correct, but hey, if you have, you want your rice and you want your beef stew, your meat stew every day, then all we're going to need from you is just for you to just to sign off on these policies and things that I need in order for me to bring you this food. And basically, it was like signing away all your rights and anything of your, freedom of expression, speech, and all that. Just completely gave it away to the government. And next thing you know, starvation starts rolling through. Because in that particular system, everything, the when I was talking about setting up that game board, and as you put pieces on, there's values on those squares or on those hex tiles. This is just the moment that your people just have no agency, that value goes to zero really fast. I'd like to see a case where you can have like a strong centralization and basically no liberalization of your ability for people to build their services. And just because people then can't aspire for something better. And the moment you can't aspire for something better, that journey that you can go on at each step of the way and just gain that sort of revelation, that self exploration, the oh yeah, I just made another step, I made another step, I made another step, I'm on the way, I'm doing really good, and that energy that generates from that, it's just gone. I don't think there's any civilization that can really stand the moment that that is gone. And that's part of here at Atomo, and then a miracle occurred as a part is we really want that to be in play, so people have something to strive for, and not like your dark triad of things. So okay, let's get back to hydraulic despotism here. So as in our game board, we're talking about capitalizing and in building assets. Now, if I just allow this to run, then what should happen is certain industries or certain corporations that I put on the game board that are built may no longer be necessary. So think about a long time ago before refrigeration. I had to go out to the lake, I had to cut ice blocks out, pick them up with the big ice, pliers or whatever, and drag them and put them in the storehouses. And then distribute them and sell them to people who have ice boxes. Now, if corporatism was running amok, then perhaps what might happen is as the refrigerator people started to come in, they learned how to use compressors and Freon. My ice block people, since they've been in business for so long, they have gained, they've capitalized on their assets. They may be able to influence the political class by buying them off. That they would press down against these refrigeration guys. This is a bit of that's dangerous technology. Those gases are nasty. So yeah, enact some laws so they can't do what they're doing. And if that in that sort of play between that corporation and that uh, in the government group creates corporatism. The other terminology for the merger of state and corporate powers is also called fascism, by the way, to go to that definition. So we really want to have the ability for other corporations to come into play. So, and we'll go back to our game board, and we have a luxury population, for example. Remember, I talked about the people that wanted the spices. And these people tend to be resistant to change. So you'll get the progressive types that want change, but once they've accomplished what they need, they don't want too much destabilization in the system. So people who finally made it tend to gravitate more to a conservative side where, okay, I just want the traditions of this. This is really nice. And there's always a push and pull. And you want to have a good tug of war between the two. You don't want it to go into extremities. But once you got this gentle push and pull, your progressives will help you improve the system, and your traditionalist people so will say there's some certain risks to the course that you're trying to take. Maybe dial it down 10 or 20%, and then so you get this good interplay. But if I really want to enact strong change, to change legal frameworks, because, well, perhaps I have these corporations, they start to manipulate. When I was talking about the game board, there's the capital city administrative, your seat of government. They start to work with the seat of government, and all of a sudden, as my corporations are pressing down on new ideas and new technologies through using corporatism, and I was talking about having values on the tiles of the game board, those values will start to reduce. And as they reduce, people get unhappy because they have less options and availability of them to maybe have certain luxuries. It's just overall the system starts to get sick that I was mentioning. So if I start to detect that and I'm in power and people get upset, they're going to remove me from power. They're going to vote me out of office, and they're going to change the landscape. And this is a refresh that happens, and it's actually as if I'm not keeping my systems in check appropriately, then the government's going to get ousted. So here in Canada, I remember when the Progressive Conservatives or the Conservative Party of Canada went so far. Possibly, I think it might have been back in the Brian Mulroney times, and there was so much going on, corruption that was happening. I think this is back 80s or 90s. I'm just going off memory, so I don't know the dates offhand, but I do remember when I was younger. Like there's just so many things going on that the government went from being a majority down to I think like 2 seats in the Conservative Party. They're just demolished. So and it's good that those things can happen because you can really just give a smack to the people that are screwing things up, uh, and reset them so that they have to kind of rethink their strategy coming forward. And there's hopes that now 2022 that the whoever you're playing for, that they can come back with better policies. But of course, then your group that's in power doesn't want to get smacked down as well. So they're going to start trying to do shenanigans. So your luxury population, though, can help shape this because they have money and they have resources that they can use. So if there's something that they don't like, they'll start to use their powers to influence elections or to influence policy. Now, if I'm really trying to change my game board, if you think about Europe, this is what I'm bringing into play here. If you think about Europe and the European Union and them trying to create this project of all these very different countries, but we're just trying to like build them into a certain one way of doing things, is that unipolar rules idea. I can't have these luxury people disrupting it. I gotta do something about that. So the other thing to think about is as they're doing this project, they made mistakes along the way. So we want to kind of wipe the slate clean and go back to frontier land so that as we're rebuilding, that I can put my hand and make sure that the things are built in the way that I think is the proper way. And that's the danger of trying to build the utopia is my proper way means that there's a bunch of other people say, no, there's another way of doing it. And they're going to resist. So I need to break them down some way. If you go back and you look at China, when China under Mao was changing, it was changing drastically, and the body count was quite high. This is the problem of this sort of way of trying to usher in utopia is usually it ends up in a very high body count. Go back to the 20th century and take a look at body count of the Soviet Union, body count of um, communist China. Think about Cambodia and Pol Pot and the body count there when you're so on and so forth. It's astronomical. Um, Maybe tens of millions. So was it 60 million, 100 million? What if I'm off by 10 million? Kind of rounding error of 10 million people. It's still atrocious. So if I'm going to recreate the frontier land, then I'm going to have to find a way to disrupt this luxury lifestyle. And of course, I got an industrialized area, especially in Germany, and in this case, is quite industrialized. In order for me to change this, I have to change the industrialization. So, one of the policies I can do is I can play green policy. What green policy means my more efficient, I talk about the thermal sources of energy. I can then reduce those. I can change them into, well, renewables is a great idea. And I don't fault the idea. The idea is good, but there's a certain speed at which you can do that so that as your people level up and they have excess money and capital and they start to care about this, they can then slowly trickle that into new types of energy at a pace that's sustainable to the population. But if I want to grab that lever and go, all right, energy policy 100%, that's going to create massive disruption, especially if I, as you're seeing, if I start to shut down, they're shutting down in Germany nuclear power plants because of the, oh, problem in Fukushima. Oh, well, that can be a very disastrous problem. So the Green Party people saying, "Oh, nuclear is a bad idea." Well, how many? Is Germany in a real disaster zone? Does it have massive earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis, tornadoes, hurricanes? I've nothing that I know of. Don't think so. So I think that sort of energy source is actually quite safe. So the shutdown of the reactors because some little girl saying, "How dare you?" Uh, well, hey, if I want to reduce this luxury population, here's a way of doing it. But that means I have to replace it with something. And if I can do that under my policies, under my guise, putting my people into those positions, that requires a lot of money in order to do that, to make that sort of change. So I talked about last time that I have these federal banks that are all connected, that are moving monetary units to help with the capitalization. But each group on my game board has one of these as well. Okay. So I used the money, as I'll just say, in my one, I got the Federal Reserve and I got the ECB. My Federal Reserve can help support industries. And um, in this particular game example, as I'm rebuilding within this new centralized umbrella, my game chips take a different hue. Now all of a sudden I got a political entity that's in play that's changing the types of chips on the game board. And this actually creates, sub factions within the empire. And I was talking before that some of these corrupt and then create problems. I have to put energy in order to keep the corruption away. But now I've gone to the point that my one group has become corrupt because they don't want to lose power. And so what they're going to do is they're going to recast the chips in a way that it provides them more power as long as they can get all the chips within their zone into their little symbol on it, for example. This costs a lot of resources. We don't know what the future value is at this point of re-chipping in this way my game pieces that I want to exert total control of my game zone in order to save the planet. So the idea here is if I can create a way to create mega chips, these unified single rule single polar type government, maybe I can flip entire countries of chips at the same time because I'm going to put them into my umbrella and cast them into it. So with the hydraulic despotism, I need a couple of things. So I need the financing in order to do it, and then I need energy to maintain this. So the first thing I want to do is to get rid of the population. Is I want to disrupt energy sources, and when I start to disrupt the energy sources, what happens then is I can put in the deindustrialization, but I need a conduit of money coming in order for me to start recasting and changing those chips. So here comes the Federal Reserve, and the ECB. If I can take the Federal Reserve and flip them to my symbol, even though they're in another area, I can then divert that energy over into me, finance, not energy. Okay, I have to keep my terms here. Financing, but I think of it as an energy stream, like when you shoot the money out from the Federal Reserve into the ECB, like swap lines and just basically just giving them the money. Then they can start to knock down and start changing their chips, and they have the costs in order to do that because now they got this money. In order to do that, I just have to basically install the chair people, Ben Bernanke and Janet Yellen, for example. Um, put them into place so that they can start beaming that money over to me so I can run my projects because the ECB was in the negative interest rate area when doing that. So ECB is like, oh, come on, please fund me. So you think about going back to the CARES Act. CARES Act was $2.2 trillion dollars, and the ECB had some packages during COVID time, COVID, CARES for COVID. ECB was running, I think, 1.85 trillion euro. But ECB just didn't have, they have, Germany was the primary place that was providing the capital. But I'm changing the way Germany's energy policy works. So that's coming at a cost. I'm actually losing, again, the energy increases the value of the territory in which my chips are on, given my game metaphor. And the moment I take the energy out, the value starts dropping dramatically. So in order to keep the values at a particular level, I have to beam in this energy to help support it, or not energy, beam in this money. Again, I think like it's an energy beam. You beam in this money. Now, here's the problem is hydraulic despotism. So one, if I take the energy away, people are going to complain. I need this money to support. I would have to buy energy sources from elsewhere. Well, we shut down Nord Stream. So you have to think about all the pipelines and watch all these pipelines that are disappearing or getting disrupted. So as these pipelines disappear, and it seems like Germany just didn't even care when this happened. Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2 is out. Government didn't seem to care. There's no like nasty grams and mean tweets and talking heads about it. The people were starting to get, the people wanted them to turn it back on. Like when it was off, Nord Stream 2 was never started. It was prepped. It was technically ready. They just had to certify it on the German side. Nord Stream 1 was in operation. Then it was blown up. Then you heard that, well, you know what? We can actually run one of the pipelines wasn't damaged as we thought, and Putin was saying, "Oh, we can turn it on. We can turn it on." You just hear crickets from Europe, so we know that there's something at play here. But on the other side, the Fed all of a sudden stopped sending the money. Jerome Powell came into play, and he stopped beaming that money over. So now he's like, okay, we really need the money because we've gone through this project of removing the no money coming in because Federal Reserve is raising rates. Well, they were beaming money, US dollars, into that system, and this is called the euro dollar system. But now the Fed starts to increase their rates. Well, what happens with money? Money goes to the place where it's treated best. So it starts to go reverse flow, starts going back the other way. Because now, if I'm increasing my lending rates, that means my money is going to be worth more. No more this beggar thy neighbor of printing and printing and printing and printing and printing. There's a lot of money in the system because these, mentioned these couple of acts on COVID. Even Canada printed closer to $1 trillion as well. So this money is sloshing around. And the Federal Reserve decides to turn on the big super vacuum cleaner, go, and then that's all now getting sucked out of Europe. So the ability to do these new energy projects are changing the chips all of a sudden. Now I can't change the chips. I got angry people, and I think the luxury class are wake up saying, "Oh, what have you been trying to do?" Um, so the hydraulic despotism has been is getting disrupted. So I talked about before, the unzippering is now happening because to set up these chips, now that game has been completely disrupted. So what that means is now some of these, now that you're starting to re-chip. So if I have like a whole bunch of white chips and I'm now changing the symbols of them, even though they're white chips, I can't quite move the territorial borders. Now those chips are up for grab for the tagging aspect of the game. And this is what you're seeing in play right now. So what we have here is looks like there's two energy blocks. a big energy bloc. So we got the USA inclusive of the Five Eyes. I'm going to call it New Zealand, Canada, Australia, the UK, and USA itself. There's five there. But you also have Russia and Arabia. I'm going to call it Arabia, like the Middle East and the global South. So what looks like is happening, you got the emergence of these two areas. You have Joe Biden go over there and saying, "Oh, please, 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 OPEC, please pump so that it looked good during the midterm elections." Again, on this channel, don't no legal advice, no financial advice, no election fornification. But you can obviously that do something nice so we can have the midterms go my way. Where did we see that before? That cause a whole bunch of problems with an orange man. So now we got finance blocks on in play. I think there's five here: USA, UK, Europe, China, Russia, and the UAE. I'm going to put the UAE into play. This is just my opinion, my projection. There's going to be some sort of trading hub in the UAE. Can't quite just. I know Moscow is going to fire up some sort of equivalent to the Chicago Commodities Exchange piece. I think that's in play. So we got those finance blocks coming into play. Problem is, UK block is European. I just talked a lot about Europe. That block is in decay because of the hoovering of the money coming out of it. The UK block is massive decay. Uh, so we've already seen the Chancellor get knocked out. Possibly the sitting UK Prime Minister might be getting knocked out. And then we're going to see, well, which side is this finance bloc going to merge with the US bloc, or is it going to merge with the European bloc, or try to merge with that bloc? Because it sounds like it's not going to be able to maintain itself as its own bloc. Looks like the city of London's going down. Broadside hit, 4 torpedoes. They're taking on water massively. Credit Suisse was hit, but the Federal Reserve set up a swap line to that. I think was 3 billion, and then I think another 6 billion went in. Swap lines is not just free money, it's an exchange for some sort of collateral. So when that beaming of money happens, it can happen in different ways. So, and also other, again, unzippering, these castle chips are very important, but they're also very expensive to maintain. So it's possible that a castle chip of the USA is falling in the Saudi Arabia area, especially with we're seeing upticks in problems with Syria. And it's possible that Turkey is flexing their castle chip in that area, and Russia is allowing certain things to happen so that the USA loses grip on their castle chip. The USA is potentially going to lose a lot more, depending on, because it takes a lot of money. This is the military industrial complex, and the bases around the world are all types of castle chips. They take a lot of money because the US is pretty much bankrupt, but in the other sense, it's probably the most robust economy when I'm talking about the chips that have the central banks. The USA is still in a very strong position. And I think what's happening is Jerome Powell is trying to make sure that that is the case. And he's not going to lose the world financial war right now, come hell or high water. And if interest rates go up to 6 or 7%, they're going to go up to 6 or 7% as long as he wins that financial game, because it's existential for him to win that financial game, as much as Russia is saying it's existential for them to achieve their objectives within the conflict that they've been having. So overall, Russia is in a very good financial position, very low debt to GDP ratio. So I'm part of my hunch and opinion is you might have the central bank chip of the USA supporting the central bank chip of Russia. Again, that's just speculation on my part. It wouldn't be shown, it wouldn't be overt, but it might be covert, because if Russia needs to change a bit of their capital infrastructure, then what might happen is some of the commercial banks of the USA might be getting in on that and giving some supports so that Europe, who is trying to take over all of the central bank chips around the world, that one's going to get crushed. And you might want to be doing like a little bit of double dip crunch on that hydraulic despotism. We're going to cut off the money. We're going to cut off the energy. But hey, if you want the energy on, we'll turn it on because we're not nasty people, is what Russia's trying to virtue signal. Uh, so that gives you some little additional setup. Uh, Let me know if this is helpful for you. Again, this is my opinions, my ideas that I'm playing around based on other things that I'm hearing, giving you a metaphor of a game board that helps to paint a picture in your head. Then hopefully that's a job that I'm assisting you with. And yeah, understand the principles behind the game.